The cabin that builds itself. Part 1. Into the woods. Soft crackle of footsteps crunching over dead leaves. A crow calls out once, then silence falls heavy across the forest. The trees were packed so thick, even the late afternoon sun barely touched the forest floor. Ethan checked his watch, grimacing. 4:37 p.m. They were hours off the trail, miles from anything resembling civilization. Rachel shoved through a wall of brush and let out a frustrated sigh. "This isn't the right way," she muttered, scanning the endless sea of green. "This map's garbage," Ethan smirked, adjusting the straps of his heavy backpack. "That's the fun of it, right? Off the grid, real adventure." Rachel shot him a glare that could have melted stone. "It's not an adventure when the sun's going down, and we don't even know which direction the car is." He shrugged. "Worst case, we camp, we've got gear." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but froze. There, sticking out of the undergrowth, was a sign. Half buried, rotted through, covered in creeping moss. She pulled back the vines, heart thudding faster. The words were nearly illegible, scratched into the wood by something with claws rather than hands. "Do not build, do not stay, do not..." The rest was torn away. Rachel swallowed hard. "Maybe we should turn around." Ethan chuckled nervously. "Spooked by an old sign? Come on." But even he noticed it now. The forest was wrong. No birds, no insects, no breeze, just stillness, heavy and suffocating. Later, the woods, even darker now. They stumbled on, the trees looking more twisted the deeper they went. Everywhere around them, shapes seemed to lean in from the corners of their vision. But when they turned, there was only bark and shadows. Rachel flicked on her flashlight, the beam slicing through the thickening mist. In the distance, barely visible through the fog, a flicker of light. She pointed. "There. Maybe it's a house or something." Ethan nodded, and together they hurried toward it. The light grew stronger, flickering like a dying candle. A clearing opened up ahead, wide and empty, and sitting at its center, as if dropped there by something ancient and uncaring, was a cabin. Rotting, collapsed in places, leaning dangerously to one side. Yet somehow, still standing, a single lantern swung from a broken porch beam, casting long skeletal shadows. Rachel hesitated at the edge of the clearing. "That doesn't look safe." Ethan grinned recklessly, the thrill of discovery lighting up his face. "Unsafe means no one's home, which means shelter." He moved forward. Rachel stayed frozen for a heartbeat longer, her instincts screaming at her. Then, against everything sane inside her, she followed. Inside the cabin, the door hung half off its hinges. Inside was darkness layered in dust. The floor creaked dangerously under their boots. The smell was heavy, mold, rot, and something sourer beneath it all. Rachel swept her flashlight around the room. Broken furniture, a fireplace stuffed with ashes, long cold, a cracked mirror hanging crookedly on the wall, reflecting the beam back at her with a warping ripple, as if the glass itself were breathing. At the far end of the cabin, a staircase led upward, but the top half of it had collapsed into a pile of broken timber. They picked a corner to settle in, unrolling their sleeping bags onto the least rotten section of the floor. The plan was simple: rest until morning, then find their way out. Simple. Hours later, dead of night, a sound jerked Rachel awake. Tap, tap, tap. She sat up, heart hammering. Ethan was still snoring lightly beside her. Tap, tap, hammering. From somewhere inside the cabin, she shone her flashlight around. The cabin looked different. New boards were nailed over the broken windows. A door frame that had been sagging earlier now stood straight and tall. The house was repairing itself. Each time she looked away, even for a second, more changes appeared. Walls smoothened, gaps filled in. The space around them grew tighter. The cabin was healing. It was growing. Rachel shook Ethan awake, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan! Ethan, something's wrong." He stirred, groaning. "What?" The floor beneath them groaned, boards shifting, stretching, and somewhere deeper in the cabin, a low groan of wood and earth answered. Part 2. The walls close in. Dark. Cold. The sound of wood groaning deep beneath the floorboards. Rachel dragged Ethan to his feet, her flashlight trembling in her hand. "Look," she whispered, voice cracking. Around them, the cabin shifted like something alive. The windows, once gaping and broken, were now boarded up tight. The cracks in the walls had vanished, sealed by freshly grown wood that still pulsed faintly, like veins. Ethan wiped sleep from, his eyes confusion quickly turning to dread. What the hell is happening? A loud, violent crack shook the cabin. They spun around, just in time to see the front door vanish, consumed by the wall growing around it. No, no, no. Rachel ran forward, pounding her fists where the door had been. It was solid, immovable. The cabin had trapped them inside. Tap, tap, tap. The hammering returned, but now it was coming from everywhere at once. Above, below, inside the walls. It wasn't nails anymore. It was roots, dark, thick, and wet, creeping in from the floorboards, weaving themselves into the wood. Rachel screamed as a root burst from the wall, inches from her face, snapping toward her like a whip. Ethan grabbed her, pulling her backward. I have to move. Now, deeper into the cabin. They ran through the cramped halls, which seemed to stretch and twist the farther they went. The cabin was bigger inside than it looked. Doorways they swore hadn't existed opened to reveal new rooms. Nursery filled with broken cribs, the mobile spinning lazily without wind. A dining room with a table set for a feast, long rotted to black slime. A library of books written in languages neither could understand, the words writhing on the pages. At every turn, the cabin reshaped itself, forcing them deeper, farther from any hope of escape. The journal in a dim corner of a forgotten study, Rachel spotted something. An old leather-bound book, half hidden under rubble. A journal. The first page was smeared with fingerprints. The ink warped from dampness, but she could still read it. "I came here seeking shelter. Now I build. I build because it demands it. I build because it feeds." Further down, "The walls need blood to stay strong. My blood was not enough." Rachel slammed the book shut, bile rising in her throat. She turned to Ethan, voice shaking. "This place isn't abandoned. It's hungry." The attack, they heard it before they saw it. A dragging sound, something heavy, wet, scraping along wood. They turned. From the end of the hall, a figure crawled into view, its body twisted unnaturally, limbs bending the wrong way. Its face was a stretched mask of horror, mouth open wide, gasping soundlessly, one of the souls trapped in the cabin. And behind it, the floor buckled and surged, forming jagged walls that shoved it closer and closer. It wasn't chasing them. It was being used. It was part of the cabin. Rachel screamed. They turned and ran blindly, the flashlight bobbing wildly in her hand. The narrow escape ahead, a ladder, leading downward into a black pit carved out of the cabin's belly. The cabin behind them shrieked, a sound like splintering trees and human voices merged together. They didn't think. They didn't plan. They climbed down into the dark as the floorboards above them snapped shut like a jaw. Underground total darkness. Their flashlight flickered, barely enough to see the walls. Roots pulsed and throbbed here, full of moving, shifting faces. Mouths gasping, hands pushing against the thin layer of bark trapping them inside. Rachel backed away, horror flooding her veins. She whispered, "They're alive. They're still alive in the walls." Ethan's voice broke. "We're next." Suddenly, a distant, metallic clang echoed through the pit. A door, still open, still waiting. Hope, sharp and painful, flared in Rachel's chest. They stumbled forward, following the sound as behind them. Cabin's roots began to stir, pulling free from the walls. It knew they were trying to escape, and it wasn't done building yet. Part 3. The Deal underground tunnels. No air, no sound, but their own ragged breathing. Rachel and Ethan pushed through the endless dark, chasing the fading clangs ahead. The roots around them trembled, vibrating against the dirt walls like veins under thin skin. Rachel's flashlight flickered again, and for a heartbeat, the beam caught a figure standing just ahead. A man, or what used to be one. His eyes were hollow, his mouth sewn shut with blackened thread. He raised a finger to his lips. Shh, and then he was gone, swallowed by the dark. The deception. They stumbled into a wider chamber, and for the first time, in hours, saw something that nearly broke them. The front door, just standing there. Perfect. Wood gleaming like fresh polish. No rot, no vines. Through the small window pane, moonlight, open space, freedom. Ethan ran forward, joy surging through his exhausted body, but Rachel didn't move. Her instinct screamed at her, bold and sharp. She watched as Ethan grabbed the doorknob, and in that instant, she saw the truth. The sea. Dower breathed. The wood pulsed, as if it were made of muscle instead of timber. The moonlight was painted onto a wall. The outside was just more cabin. A trap. "Ethan, stop!" she shrieked, but it was too late. The illusion. Shatters. The door split open like a mouth. Long black tendrils shot out, wrapping around Ethan's arms, his legs, his throat. He screamed, not in pain, but betrayal. The cabin wasn't trying to keep them inside. It was trying to consume them. Rachel lunged, grabbing Ethan's hand, fighting, screaming, pulling with every ounce of strength she had. For a terrible moment, she thought she'd lose him. Then, with a final desperate tug, she tore him free, and they collapsed backward onto the dirt. The fake door sealed itself shut behind them. Gone. The voice in the dark. They lay there, gasping, blood pounding in their ears. Then a voice, deep, ancient, cracking like old wood, filled the chamber. It didn't come from around them. It came from inside their heads. Build, stay, offer. Rachel clutched her head, pain blooming behind her eyes. Ethan, pale and trembling, whispered, "It wants us to build something, to stay, or to offer something in return." Rachel's stomach twisted. Offer what? Another clang rang out. Not ahead this time, but to their right. Another path. Another choice. But behind them, tunnels were collapsing, roots slamming shut like snapping jaws. They had no choice but forward. The new room. They stumbled into a new part of the underground. Bizarre. Impossible. It was an entire neighborhood. Half-built houses rotting in the dirt. Front yards overgrown with fungus. Streetlights bent into skeletal shapes. It looked like the cabin had been trying to replicate an entire town. And failed. Rachel's mind reeled. Was this what happened to others before them? The offer in the center of the ghost town. Standing beneath a broken clock tower was a figure. A woman wearing Rachel's face. Only wrong. Off. Her smile stretched too wide, her eyes too dark. She held out her hand, and in it, a hammer. The voice boomed again. Build or bleed. The meaning was crystal clear. Build a new cabin for it, expand its trap, feed it new victims, or die here and become part of its pulsing, rotting walls. The betrayal. Rachel looked at Ethan, heartbreaking. He stared at the hammer, stared at the empty waiting structures, stared at Rachel, and Rachel saw it, the flicker in his eyes, the calculation, the choice. He took a step toward the woman, toward the hammer. Rachel's voice cracked. "Ethan, don't." Deep down, she already knew. Fear changes people, and Ethan had already made up his mind. Final scene of the part. Rachel backed away, tears burning her eyes. The walls trembled with excitement, sensing the betrayal, thriving on it. As Ethan reached out for the hammer, Rachel spun and ran. plunging deeper into the rotting, shifting maze. Behind her, she heard Ethan's voice calling, "Rachel, wait! We can survive! We just have to help it!" But Rachel wasn't listening anymore. She knew the truth. Some fates were worse than death, and building for the cabin meant becoming part of it forever. Part 4. Ashes and Teeth. Rachel ran blindly through the half-built ghost town beneath the earth. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her flashlight barely cutting through the suffocating dark. Behind her, she could still hear Ethan shouting her name, and something else. The cabin was speaking through him now, a chorus of whispers layered into his voice. Stay. Build. Become. She shoved the sound from her mind, stumbling over broken beams and rotting doors. The ground below trembled, the cabin angry, its prey slipping away. The first trap, a deep rumble, split the silence. Rachel turned just in time to see the ground behind her crack open, a jagged pit yawning wide, edges lined with snapping roots like teeth. She barely jumped across, skidding on the other side. The pit hissed behind her, closing slowly like a mouth denied its meal. She was running out of time. Discovery in the dark up ahead. A glimmer, not light, metal. A rusted old water tower, half buried in the cavern roof. Hope flared sharp and desperate. If she could climb it, reach the top, maybe there was a way out. A tunnel, a crack to the surface. She sprinted toward it, lungs burning. Roots snapped at her ankles, walls shuddering as the cabin tried to close in. The climb, the ladder was half rotted, metal squealing under her weight as she hauled herself up. Halfway, their screams echoed from below. Rachel looked down and saw Ethan. But he wasn't Ethan anymore. His body was bloated, skin stretched tight over veins black with rot. His arms were too long, his fingers splintered into jagged claws. He didn't climb the ladder. He crawled up the walls, pulling himself toward her with sickening ease. Rachel screamed, redoubling her climb. The top of the tower, she reached the platform and found herself inside an old maintenance shed, miraculously intact. Inside, a toolbox, rusted canisters, old tarps, and a half-buried jerry can. She yanked it free, sniffed, gas, still potent. Hope surged inside her chest. She could fight. She could burn this nightmare, but she needed more, a plan. Because one thing was certain now, the cabin wouldn't let her go easily. Ethan's final form, a shriek, tore through the cavern below. Rachel rushed to the edge of the platform and saw Ethan, or the thing that had been Ethan. It stood in the clearing, arms snapping and reforming like wet wood, eyes black and gleaming. The other houses around him pulsed and shifted, walls breathing, doors splitting open like hungry mouths. Ethan, no, the cabin, was building itself faster now, feeding off his surrender, growing. If she didn't act now, the forest above would be next, then the next town, then more, the spark of defiance. Rachel gripped the jerry can tighter, feeling the liquid slosh inside. She looked up at the tower ceiling, at the thick roots burrowing through the structure. She smiled, bitter and furious. If the cabin wanted blood and wood and flesh, she would give it fire instead. To set up quickly, she tore the tarp into strips, knotting them around broken pipes as makeshift torches. She doused everything in gasoline, hands shaking but determined. From below, Ethan's twisted voice howled up at her. "Rachel, come home. It's so easy. Just one nail, one plank." She shoved the voice out of her mind. Cabin's voice, not Ethan's anymore. Lighting the match. Rachel struck a rusted lighter she found in the toolbox. Took 3 agonizing tries, then a spark. The tarp caught instantly, flames roaring to life. The entire tower groaned, not from the fire, but from the cabin, screaming inside the walls. Roots thrashed wildly, trying to snuff out the flames. But Rachel was faster. She hurled the burning torches down into the town, below, onto the half-built houses, onto the rotting earth. The fire caught. It raced along the ground, a wave of flame devouring everything. Cabin howled. The walls shook. The roots blackened and shriveled, peeling back from her path. Escape? The roof of the cavern cracked overhead. Daylight, real daylight, spilling through. Rachel's heart leapt. She could climb. She could be free. But first, she had to survive the next few minutes, because the cabin wasn't done fighting yet. Part 5. Roots of Fire. The cavern trembled as the fire devoured everything in its path. Rachel stumbled across the crumbling rooftop of the tower, gasping for breath. Flames licked the walls. The ground beneath her cracked open like shattered bones. Above, a jagged hole in the cavern ceiling. Real daylight, real air, freedom. But between her and escape stood Ethan, or what was left of him. Final confrontation. The thing wearing Ethan's skin lurched forward, arms twisted into grotesque branches. His voice gurgled, half burning. Stay, build, belong. Rachel tightened her grip on the jerry can, her last weapon. You're not Ethan, she spat. You never were. The creature smiled, mouth splitting open wider than humanly possible. But you could be. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Rachel wasn't just fighting a monster. She was fighting the part of herself that wanted to give up, the exhaustion, the grief, the pull to surrender, to just become part of something bigger, even if it was monstrous. The choice. She hesitated. One heartbeat, and the cabin sensed it. Roots shot up from the ground, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down, pulling her home. The Ethan thing reached out, fingertips brushing her cheek with unnatural tenderness. You don't have to fight anymore, it whispered. Rachel looked into its hollow eyes and saw the faces of everyone the cabin had ever consumed. Hundreds, thousands, all the ones who gave in. The final stand, her hand closed around the lighter. Without thinking, without second guessing, she flicked it. The flame roared to life, and she dropped it onto herself, onto the gasoline-soaked clothes, the roots clutching her legs. Oomph! Rachel became a living torch. The roots screamed. The creature shrieked. The entire cavern ignited like a bomb going off underground, climbing through fire. Blinded by pain and smoke, Rachel ripped herself free, scrambling, clawing up the collapsed tunnel toward the light, hands bleeding, skin blistering, every muscle screaming to stop. But she climbed anyway, because giving up wasn't an option anymore. Because she'd rather die burning on her feet than live forever on her knees. The surface Rachel burst out of the earth, into the cold, mountain air, into the blinding sun. She collapsed onto the grass, coughing black smoke, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, the ground shuddered, then caved in entirely. A blast of flame erupted skyward. The cabin, its roots, its walls, its monstrous heart, obliterated. But not everything. Burns Rachel rolled onto her back, staring at the sky. She thought she heard, for just a second, with whispers on the wind, soft, gentle, mocking. Another will build, another will stay, always. She knew it wasn't truly over. The cabin might be gone here, but its hunger was older than the woods, older than the earth. And somewhere out there, deep in some forgotten forest, or rotting house or empty town, it would start again, waiting, building, growing.